Today's date is November 10th, which means the Halloween season just recently ended only a couple days ago. Now, if you're a Spirit Halloween fan like me, Spirit obviously won't be releasing any animatronics for a pretty decent amount of time, and even when they do, it's going to be an online only and just a throwaway item that they picked up from another company. But if you might actually not know that even though the Halloween season is over, Spirit Halloween is looking at products right now that will be released for the 2021 Halloween season. Not only that, but they are looking at prototype animatronics that will be released for 2021. Now today, we're going to be discussing prototypes and the prototype animatronics from Spirit Halloween. For Everything Scary, I'm GMHaunts, and today we are going to be taking a look at some of the prototype animatronics from Spirit Halloween. Now today we are going to be taking a look at some prototype versions of animatronics that already have come out. So you're going to be seeing some early versions of current animatronics, and we're going to be discussing the differences between how they ended up coming out and how they were in the beginning. We're going to be talking about what the prototypes reveal about Spirit Halloween, and we're going to be discussing if the prototypes are better or worse than the actual versions. So without further ado, join me on my case study of Spirit Halloween prototype animatronics. So the first prototype animatronic that we're going to be looking at today is Uncle Charlie. So obviously this is the 2020 version of Uncle Charlie because we have no pictures of the prototype of the 2010 one, but this is the early version and prototype of the brand new reimagining of Uncle Charlie. So as you can see, I'm showing you this one because it is a good example of a prototype that isn't very different from the actual version. Taking a look at it, again, it doesn't have very many visual differences from how it ended up coming out, but there are a couple things. Number one, it definitely looks more kind of white and more like there's a spotlight on it. Again, that could just have to do with editing and how the picture was taken, but it is definitely more white looking, like it has a light on it more than it actually has detail in it. Another thing, the face does look a little different to me, at least. That might also just be because of the distortion on this one, but the face and the mouth look a little different than how it ended up coming out. And again, the way they have the bucket and the lollipop position would be just how they positioned it. But again, this is a good example of one that isn't very different from the actual version. Another thing, again, from the hair to the rest of the outfit, it looks very, very alike to the actual version. You could maybe say that the hat looks a little more shiny and different than the actual version does, and it looks more like the original Uncle Charlie, but again, that could have something to do with how the picture was taken or how it was edited, so I'm not going to say that, but this is a good example of a prototype that looked very similar to the actual version. Without further ado, let's go ahead to the second prototype we're going to look at. So next up, we're going to be looking at the prototype of Pennywise from 2019 and a return this year in 2020. So as you can see, this is a very good example of a prototype that looked very, very different from how the actual animatronic ended up coming out. So if you're taking a look at this prototype Pennywise, you can see that the face model was completely different. The original face sculpt and face model they were going to use on this animatronic was not the same material, and it looks like a hard plastic, where maybe it wouldn't even feature a moving mouth, which the actual version did. Another thing that's very, very different is how bright and vibrant that orange hair is. Even though the new one did have orange hair, it looked not even close as vibrant and not as fake looking. I will say I really enjoy the new one compared to how this prototype looked, because I don't really enjoy how this one looked, just because that face sculpt does look very plasticky, and I wouldn't have liked if they ended up coming out with a plastic face, because it would look like cheap quality. Again, the hands are posed again very differently than how the actual version ended up coming out. You can always say, again, that just because they bent it in a certain way, but it could also be that originally the arms are supposed to be posed like that, and it did not end up coming out like that, because again, that does look like he's just standing, and when he pops up, he probably would look very different. But again, I do not really like that face sculpt, and I'm glad that they changed it in the actual version. It's interesting, again, how on this prototype, one hand is kind of coming out and one is in. Again, could be because of posing. It also could be on that's how it was supposed to be. And it's just a strange way on how they wanted the arms to be posed, because the new one had arms that were posed more to the side, and this one had arms that were posed more just straight down. Either way, I enjoy the new one a lot more than this early prototype, and it really shows how an animatronic can change and how the design can change while it is in the production process. Now we're going to be taking a look at the next Spirit Halloween animatronic prototype. So the next prototype animatronic we're going to be looking at is Peekaboo Clown from this year. Now, here is another really good example of a prototype that looked really different from how the actual version ended up coming out. So if you take a look at this prototype of Peekaboo Clown, you can see that the arms were actually posed very differently than how they ended up coming out. So again, this could have to do with how they had it posed, because he does have posable arms, but if you look at how the head is, it actually went into the arms a little differently than how it ended up coming out, where you can actually see one eye sticking out. Another really big difference you can see is that the hands were actually different color on this prototype. Obviously, the actual version, when it ended up coming out, it had white hands, making it look like white vintage gloves, but on this version, the prototype, the hand color actually matched with his skin, so it kind of looked like his hands were his skin and he wasn't wearing gloves. Again, I really like the new one more than this one, because I like the gloves more than this look. Another thing that kind of looked a little different, and you can see this better when on the prototype activated view, again, you can see this on the wiki if you want to see more pictures of it, is the face actually looked very much different than how the real version ended up coming out. If you look, it looked more kind of distorted on this prototype on how the face looked. The nose was more pointed out, the mouth was very different than how it was, and it looked more kind of beaten up than the real version. If you look on this prototype, the hair was also more ruffled up and looked like it had been messed with. So again, that's another difference on this prototype. One thing that might not be a difference on how it was, but it could have just, again, been how they did it, was the legs they look kind of different, where the styrofoam maybe only went up to a certain part. Because if you look at how the pants kind of roll up on the waist there, it looks kind of weird and bad, like he doesn't have legs. Again, this was fixed on the actual version, but this might have been a problem of the styrofoam pieces on the legs not going all the way up to his waist. So, next up, we are going to be taking a look at the last prototype Spirit Halloween animatronic we're going to look at in this video. So, let's check out the next prototype animatronic. Now, the last prototype animatronic we are going to be looking at in this video is Miserable Marie. So, this photo is from the series of leaked photos that came out in July, in the beginning of the leak season, from the IAC manual, or the theme manual of the themes. Now, obviously, this was set up in the flagship store when they were taking the pictures from the manual, and as you can see, it does look a little different from the actual Miserable Marie. So, one difference that you can see from the actual version that ended up coming out was that the eyes were actually white on this prototype. The actual version, the eyes were black, but as you can see here, they were little white balls instead of black. Now, another thing that, again, I mentioned this when I was reacting to the leaked photos back in a while ago, probably, again, back in July, was that it actually looked like that she was a little taller. If you look at the way she's posed, where she kind of looks like she's bent over and towering over the person in front of her, on whoever that would be, if you look at how her head is over where her chest is. Now, again, this does look like to me that it was either a taller than 5 foot, or she had a different motion where she kind of sprang forward a little bit more than she actually did, because it definitely looks like her arms are kind of towering and her head is towering. Another difference is her face. Again, this is kind of hard to see because it's a little blurry, but if you look at her face, it looks more skeleton-like and a little skinnier and smaller than the actual version did, and it actually looks scarier on this one, I think, than the actual version. But those are some of the big differences on this version than the actual Miserable Marie, and I think it definitely does prove, again, how the design can really change from prototype to actual animatronic. So that is going to wrap up all the prototype Spirit Halloween animatronics that we are going to look at today. So let's cut to the outro. So that's going to wrap up my video on reacting to and looking at some of the prototype animatronics from Spirit Halloween. Let me know in writing a comment down below. Would you like to see another part of me looking at more prototypes? This was just an idea I came up with and I thought it would be kind of interesting. So definitely let me know if you'd like to see a part 2 of looking at more prototypes. I would definitely love to do it. Just let me know if you want to see it. As always, remember, for everything scary, I'm GMHaunts. I'll see you guys later for more spooky videos. Goodbye.